How was your day?
It's fine.
How's your uterus?
My uterus is good.
Yeah?
Yep.
It's not constantly expanding?
My uterus is currently growing a little baby Denver because it lives inside you. My uterus is your uterus. I mean, isn't that what they said? What's mine is yours?
Our uteri. Uterus. In love with movies, in love, in love,
Dani and Nic.
in love with movies. Da-da-da.
And with that, welcome back, movie lovers.
I'm Dani.
And I'm Nic.
And it's just us today. Sorry, guys. Clearly, we don't have a lot of topics to talk about. Just my uterus.
Indeed. We have the bittersweet news, perhaps, for those of you who love us absolutely adoringly and don't ever find us annoying like the two of us do find about ourselves.
I thought you were going to say each other.
Nope.
Oh, really? Because I think you're annoying sometimes.
Ouch.
You don't think I'm annoying, ever?
I never said I didn't.
Okay.
I plead the fifth.
Honesty, sir.
We've talked about, I don't know if we talked about it here, but you and I've talked about, yes, I find you annoying sometimes. And you find me annoying sometimes. And I always love you, but not in every moment do I like you.
And that's how we're going to start our love podcast today.
That's right. This is In Love with Movies. And what do we do here, Dani?
Talk about love and movies, Nic.
There you go. Normally, lately, we have been joined with guests, and we do enjoy being joined with guests. But unfortunately, due to a tight window for us to have to try to produce this episode, and we had some issues scheduling, and then had to push back, and then our guests, unfortunately, they have laryngitis. Legitimately, like, laryngitis cannot speak, so on an audio medium, that would kind of be difficult.
I think laryngitis is a great excuse if you don't want to do a podcast.
Touche. I was only texting with my
guests. Friend. Yeah, cannot confirm nor deny.
All right, well, I will say, listeners, if you want to go ask and inquisit about whether our friends are actually sick or not, that's a great excuse for you to go check out their work. They have, they exist on Twitter, and they have a vlog, a family travel vlog, called Family on Standby. They have been with us. The last time was in season 1, Nic and Brittany Stretchberry. I almost said Nic and Dylan. Dylan is his brother, not Brittany, his wife. Anyway, so go check them out. In all seriousness, we know that they're not well, that they were recovering from some things, and we really do hope them, wish them all the best. But, do go check them out, because if you had them here, we would have been encouraging you to go check them out anyway. And we can thank or blame them, depending upon how you want to look at it, for the movie that we watched for tonight's episode, Dani.
Absolutely, yeah. We had to watch Scream.
That's right.
Which is a movie I would never pick myself.
And that will be the second half of our podcast, but on this first half, we typically discuss things having to do with love, relationships, and, it's a lot easier, and that's why we have guests these days, when we just kind of quiz them about what's going on in their relationship.
Yeah, because Nic and I don't have much to talk about anymore.
I don't know that it's that we don't have much to talk about, it's just that we were talking about what we would talk about tonight, and we literally, you were like, oh, why don't we discuss, our Halloween traditions, and I was like, well, if you refer back to our episode where we discussed, what's the word? Nightmare Before Christmas was the movie, and we kind of talked about, Christmas traditions, Halloween traditions, and what's our family favorite things, and what are our best memories, and you were like, well, you could talk about your best memories. I was like, I'm 99% certain I shared literally the first answer to my question.
Well, Nic, you're giving me too much credit to assume that I listen to our own podcast.
No, it's not that I'm assuming you listen to it. I know that's not true.
I just don't remember. What are we on? Season 4?
5. Remember? 5 years of marriage.
See?
This is literally only episode 2. She was so proud of herself. If you listeners who've been listening to this, you're thinking back and you're like, man, I was just binge listening and I just heard 20 minutes ago, well, I guess it'd be 2 hours ago probably if you're in your second episode, but Dani was just talking about how she knew what season it was and knew what episode, and we were all proud, and look how quickly she forgets.
Things have changed. My body has changed.
I mean,
my mind and my soul have changed. I got lost in the Target parking lot the other day. It's never happened to me before. So yes, I'm unwell, not doing well.
Indeed.
Indeed.
So what is it we decided we were going to go ahead and talk about a little bit here, since it goes along with the spooky, scary Halloween theme of the season?
Well, we were going to talk about Halloween a little bit, right?
Oh, okay.
Nick doesn't want to talk about Halloween.
I thought I was softballing you the fact that we were going to discuss other things because we didn't have anything to discuss having to do with Halloween. Not because there's, like, I don't want to talk about it, but because they've already heard it. I literally just went on for 2 minutes about how they've already heard this.
Again, you give me too much credit to think that I'm listening when you talk.
Wow. Listeners, this is marriage. This is, I welcome you into this. Good luck.
What's your favorite candy, Nick?
Kit Kat. Growing up, definitely. Like when
Kit Kat?
the candy that I would trade for or whatever when you were younger. Kit Kat.
I've always
Why
seen
are you aghast?
Because you're always like in a vending machine. You're like, I gotta get that big Twix.
I do like a Twix. I feel like Twixes maybe weren't as common as the small Kit Kats when I was growing up. Believe it or not, I can remember when Twix first hit the scene.
No.
I'm
about to Google it.
Okay, we're gonna Google. I was gonna Google it. I bet you it is post 1988.
When did Trix come out?
Trix? Trix cereal is not the same as Twix. And by the way, Kit Kats and Twix both include a cookie
and break
something
them in
else
half.
Wrapped in
1979. You weren't alive. You don't remember Twix coming out.
I remember. Okay, you know what it might be?
What?
I was in rural-ish Ohio. That must just not have hit, Ohio.
Here, let me tell you a brief history of Twix. The product was first produced in the United Kingdom in 1967, and it was introduced in the United States in 1979. The name is, what's this word?
Twin sticks.
No, that word.
Oh, a portmanteau.
What's that mean?
It's like a combination of two words, I think.
Portmanteau. Oh, of twin sticks.
Yeah.
I thought it was a different language. Like Potawatomi.
What word are you trying to say right now? Seriously.
Potawatomi.
Listeners, help. Send help. I don't know what's happening.
My favorite candy is Reese's.
Yes, because you do like them frozen.
Okay, but I do have to tell you.
Has it always been your favorite, though?
I really like Fun Dip back in the day.
Okay. I guess, I remember Fun Dip being in the, in what you call it?
Trick or treating.
Thank you.
Candy?
That's the word I'm looking for.
But I do honestly think it was
I think
always.
we both have pregnancy brain. I just can't remember shit.
I really do think it was Reese's.
Back in the day?
I've always been a chocolate gal.
Yeah, we both like chocolate.
And like, what candy has the most calories? Probably Reese's. Like, give me more. And all the rich houses, you can get like the jumbo.
Yep.
Candy. And I would always be like, please give me the king pack. Is that what it's called? The king pack? The king size? Where it was like 4 Reese's in one,
Probably.
The cups. And now they have ghosts and bats and pumpkins and white chocolate pumpkins, white chocolate ghosts. A lot. And I do like them frozen. But lately, I swear I'll get to the next topic. Lately,
I'm just starting to feel like you were resistant to the topic I proposed, but then you said yes, but then you said you wanted to do lighthearted stuff first, and it just feels like you don't want to talk about the thing I proposed, which is fine.
I got it.
Okay.
Ready for my segue?
Go for it.
What was I just talking about? Oh.
This is why we normally have guests. Family on standby, this is your fault.
Listen. Reese's, favorite.
Ghosts, white chocolate.
The past, I think 3 weeks now, I have not gone a single day without putting minimum 10 gummy bears.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Reese's, but I knew you were into gummy bears lately.
Or 10 to like 100 gummy items in my mouth. I've had twin snakes. Those are great because one's sweet and one's sour. Did you know sour shoes? Wait, what are they called? Kicks. Sour Kicks are shoes. They're gummy shoes.
Where were you eating this?
My coworker got them for me. They're like big sneakers.
You're like sneaking candies that I don't even know about.
And then the other day, Wes gave me a 5-pound bag of gummy bears. Guess how many pounds are left? Not a lot. So yeah, that's my new thing because I can't stop eating them. And you know what? I don't feel guilty about it because you know why? I'm pregnant.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Well, I just have to remind people, it's a kind of a new thing.
I mean,
It's actually not
getting
that new.
a little bit old at this point.
Tell me about it.
I didn't even mean it like that, but that was perfect.
Yeah, I'm real sick of it. And tomorrow or Friday, so before this podcast episode comes out, I will have reached 20 weeks, which is, for you people who didn't know this, I didn't know this either, halfway through the pregnancy.
Indeed.
You would think that, what's 9 months times 4 weeks? What's 9 times 4? 36. You would think that 36 weeks is full pregnancy, but it's not. It's 40 weeks.
Well, but that is for a reason.
Because they count it from the day of your last missed period.
Correct. And so that's where, like, for those of you who don't know how this works, conception can only occur on one day, and it's exactly halfway of the month between, you know, your periods. And so that means there's actually, like, this 2-week window that they count as your first 2 weeks of pregnancy, but you're not actually pregnant. Like, you literally are not yet, cannot yet have been creating life.
Yeah, so also I want to just propose a trigger warning / if you're bored of or you want to hear about pregnancy, but mostly trigger warning, you might want to skip to the movie part. There won't be too many trigger things there. Just, if you haven't seen the movie, go watch it. Because we're going to talk about scary things that have happened in pregnancy and in the pregnancy world. But one thing I did learn recently, very recently, and I am over 30 years old, is that you can only get pregnant on one day. That's wild to me.
Yeah, I remember, yeah.
In 5th grade, they bring you on a bus to, I think it was called like the Robert Crown Center. You don't know, you're not from here.
I was just going to say, as if this is like the same place that everyone gets brought for this health sciences conversation.
5th grade, on a bus, middle of the woods, Robert Crown Center.
Oh my God.
And then they say, boys, you go in this room. Girls, you go in this room. And then I don't know what the boys watched, but I saw.
I was going to say, us that didn't take us to some other center for some reason.
It was like
they
a
literally were just
large
like boys
theater.
in Mr. Campbell's room and girls in Mrs. Davis's room, I think was where
No, it was a specialty place.
Oh. Do you know why that probably was?
Because I grew up in Chicagoland area.
I'm guessing it has something to do with like the public school system. Like wasn't supposed to teach you, or they had to go outside, or they couldn't trust someone here. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, but I couldn't.
Either way, the public school system failed us both because we didn't know this piece of information,
and they didn't actually tell you how to make a baby. They told you the logistics, like the egg and the sperm, and the things that go in the fallopian tubes and that. But they didn't tell you how to do it before. Like, how do you physically do it?
Oh, they didn't talk about penises going into vaginas?
No.
Oh, I definitely remember having conversations about penises and vaginas. Although most of it, from what I recall, maybe I had the penis-vagina conversation with my mom, and then I was like, it was old hat when they were like, your body is changing. You're going to have night emissions, and that's a wet dream.
Okay.
They talked about other things is what I'm trying to say. You might
That's
be right.
what they talk about in the boy room.
Yeah. You're going to start smelling in your underpits.
Underpits.
You're correct. They did not talk about the actual sex of it because somehow they believe that, which to me, this is I'm going to stand a little bit on a soapbox. I apologize to anyone who hates it when I do this, but yeah, that's a flaw of the public education system and the fact that we try to be like abstinence is the only thing. There's a pretty fair body of evidence that shows that kids who want to have sex are going to have sex. Like teenagers who want to have sex are going to have sex. You're better off if the goal is to avoid unwanted teen pregnancy and also obviously STIs, but like teach them how to do that better. And that includes contraception, and that includes even just knowing that there's only one day a month that you're actually like, I think it comes from like the 1970s, our parents' generation, where there was like this whole, it was a contraceptive practice was to try to like count the days and know your ovulation schedule. It was like, I can't remember, there's like a name for it.
Cycles tracking or
yeah, I mean it is that. There was like some popular name instead of saying condoms. Yeah, exactly. And so and they had idiot teenagers who were bad at it, and it's not always easy to track. You have an app that does it, and it's still sometimes off by a day or two.
It was not this time.
Correct, but
It worked.
point being, like, it can be, and that's easy to mess up, and then you end up with kids that you didn't want, because some idiot was like, oh, I know today's not the day that I can get pregnant, so it's safe. As opposed to that, though, then we come to this belief that if we just tell kids, like, it always results in it, every day of the month, all the time, constantly, every time you have sex, you're running the risk. Technically, that's true, but it's all about, like, probabilities, you know what I mean? Like, two weeks away from D-Day, or better yet, 3 days after ovulation, you're at a near zero chance. Like,
but it's because kids cannot be trusted.
And, well, that's the presumption that we make. But as things we've been discovering, for example, alcohol, I think that there is this belief maybe in our society that it's like the thing to do with alcohol. Danielle's made a choice not to drink at all this entire time. I don't even think you've had a sip of wines that you thought you were curious about. Anyway, however, other countries apparently do, and we've read some books that talk about the sort of statistics of it and the metrics of it, and yes, fetal alcohol syndrome is like a very serious thing, and, like Danielle said, it's a very scary thing, trigger warning, but the chances or the amounts of alcohol it would take to do that basically require binge drinking or, like, regular drinking every single day, which people obviously sometimes do, but it's certainly not like, if you have a glass of wine at any point in your pregnancy, you will kill your child.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it's presented. But again, I think it's this lack of trust in people that if you give them the information and you give them all of the information, that they can trust it. But then again, we're in a post-truth society and nobody actually agrees on what facts are, so I'll step off my soapbox now.
Yeah, that was a lot. But we are learning a lot of things in these past 5 months. Is that true? 5 months.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And let me tell y'all, we didn't really talk about this in the last episode because we talked about they had a full-ass baby.
Mm-hmm.
So
They
we
already
talked
had a
about a
kid.
baby. Pregnancy sucks, and this is not everyone's experience. This is just Danny Miami's experience. But I am having an awful time, if I'm being truthful. And starting week 5 from probably week 18, so that's a good... Please do math for me. 13 weeks, 3 months.
We're at week 20. You're about to say you've been,
Well,
sick?
I felt better a little bit.
Until this morning. Or yesterday or whatever it was.
But yeah, no, I felt so sick, so unbelievably nauseous.
For 13 weeks, you're saying. Yeah.
Yes, straight. That I never thought I could feel that way. And people say, quote, morning sickness. That's bullshit.
Yeah.
I was sick all day.
Yeah.
Every day.
Yeah.
Waking up, hating the way I felt, and I was tired, and I had headaches, and I really felt like I was hungover for 4 months.
Yeah.
It was awful. And I feel a lot better now. I have a lot more energy, and I'm not as nauseous throughout the day. However, yesterday, I bent over, I coughed, and I puked on the carpet.
And
I'm like a freaking cat.
And this is a good time to get a chance to laugh about it, too. Because one of the things we've talked a lot about, even early on in some of the most scary parts of pregnancy that we've experienced, is the fact that nobody seems to talk about it. It's this, like, taboo topic that, yes, it's scary. Everyone seems to say from our experiences that even those who've had really bad experiences like yours, even those who've had worse experiences, have turned around and had more children sometimes because they're like, it's worth it. Yeah. And in the long run, it's worth it. And in fact, that's been a conversation that's come up with us where you're like, you've turned to me since like week 6 when, things weren't going away. And you were just like, I can't do this. Like, there's no way that I could do this a second time. And all I could really say was, I understand that feeling. Please just let's make a promise to each other that we won't actually have that conversation and make that decision until after this is all over. Like after we have a child in our hands. And then somewhere around, I think week 9 or 11, you were still saying the same thing. And while I was coming back with the same thing, like my heart had changed, having seen you be in that level of misery for as long as you had been. And again, not everyone's experience. If this is not what your experience is, that's great.
No, fuck you.
I'm happy for you. My wife understandably might be bitter. But like, either way, like it's good to know that that's also normalized, that that's okay if that is your experience. I feel like there's also this cultural pressure to talk about like, oh, you're glowing and pregnancy was the greatest thing ever. And oh, I just don't even remember any of it because it's no, you could say, I love my kid and they made it worth it, but the worth it was fucking miserable, which to me is like, oh, okay, that would tell me even more that kids are worth it. Like if you're like, pregnancy was great and the kids are the greatest thing ever, then okay. But if you're like, pregnancy was horrible, but it's worth it, then I believe you more.
Yeah. I will say, already sitting in this moment, I can't picture what I felt like a couple weeks ago, which is dangerous. But I had a horrible, horrible time, and I felt shame almost by saying that. And then good thing Facebook's still a thing, not for a lot of reasons, but to find like groups of women who are going through the same thing and just saying like, I don't like this. I don't like being pregnant. TikTok too is like honestly really normalized. Like, it's okay to not like every step of the process.
Right.
I'm sure we'll like our baby. I really hope we like our baby.
I am supremely confident we will love our child unconditionally.
Correct.
Whether we like them or not all the time, again, we already discussed I don't like you all the time, so it's a big ask.
But, like, for example, there was a day a couple weeks ago. It was like past the 12 weeks where everyone says you're great. And then past the 14 weeks. And then past the 16 weeks where you're fine. None of that ever happened for me. But I was like, all right, I got dressed, got in the car, started driving to work.
I know the story.
I ate a little bit of breakfast sandwich, took a little sip of coffee, and then yacked in my car. Like, as I'm driving, luckily I'm a slob. See, I know you get upset with me because I'm a slob sometimes, but I had a doggy bag ready because it was my Dunkin' bag left over, and I just threw up. Luckily, I made it in the bag, and I was super extra pissed because, first of all, I was at a stop sign. People were laying on the horn. I'm like, excuse me, ma'am. I know you have to get to work, but I am puking. Second of all, I used all my points on that breakfast sandwich. And it came right back up. What a waste of 800 points.
Oh, my God.
Because Dunkin's expensive now. Anyways, yeah.
Go ahead. Continue. Finish your thought.
It's just like, your body is not your own, and I know that sounds cliche or whatever, but like, I didn't wake up thinking I'm going to throw up today. I just drove and puked. Yesterday, I bent over and puked. Like...
And I think this, to me, articulates, too, and we should circle back into the coffee thing, because I know some people will hear Danielle she drank coffee, she said, and freak out and know that that's a thing that they say you're not supposed to do at all under any circumstances, whatever conditions. That's another thing that if you actually look into the research, and we've done some of the like probabilities and like, yes, large amounts of coffee, but I think this is something that, you know, I know my dad would have 3 pots, not cups, pots of coffee throughout a day. And if you're a woman who was in this sort of 1980s workplace, you just have constantly coffees regularly. Somebody's brewing it all the time. You're like literally always drinking coffee. Ugh. You would be having so much coffee that you would reach an unhealthy level of coffee. I would argue that's maybe an unhealthy level of coffee for you regardless of whether you're pregnant or not. But it's certainly an unhealthy level of coffee for you if you are pregnant. Point being, having like a small cup or like a cup of decaf or like 2 cups throughout the entire day.
You can have up to 4 cups safely, but I'm not. Because the other thing is, I'm a coffee gal. I love coffee so much. I was probably drinking 3 a day, or like a latte and something else.
And
I couldn't stand the smell of coffee. In fact, I still can't stand the smell of coffee. It makes me sick.
Yeah, because you're still drinking iced coffees.
I can't have hot coffee. It grosses me out so much. The smell of like brewing coffee. This morning you were brewing coffee and I was like, don't puke, don't puke, don't puke.
Aww.
Like in the office today, someone was brewing coffee. I'm like, please don't puke. It's just your body is like also trying to protect you to be like, you shouldn't have, well, again, coffee isn't bad.
Well, and
really
that's the reason I was bringing it up is because like there are things that don't get talked about that are much scarier and should be talked about in my humble opinion. And then there are things that are made out to be way scarier than they turn out to actually be. Yeah. And there is no shortage. I mean, I've heard this a lot, and so it sounds cliche to me at this point, but there is no shortage of people who will share their, quote, opinions with you as if they are known gospel fact.
And imagine being me.
I say you. I'm hearing it through you.
Tangentially.
Yeah.
I have women especially telling me every single day what I should and should not be doing. Like when I was nauseous, eat ginger. I tried that. You think I didn't try that?
I mean, they may not have known, but... Yeah.
Or I'm a fitness instructor.
Yeah.
I do jumping jacks for a living. It's not my full-time job, but 3 times a week I'm teaching you jumping jacks.
I remember
at some point.
Yeah, at some point early on in the pregnancy when you were still only like within a month, 2 months or something like that, someone was like getting at you for lifting a bag that was like 7 pounds or something like that.
Lifting a box that was, yeah. And I get yelled at. I got yelled at yesterday in my workout class for jumping. And it's just like, there's so many rules and things that people think you can and can't do, and everyone is, once they find out you're pregnant, is not afraid to share their opinion, to say, 40 years ago when I had my child, this is the way it was.
And it all comes from a place of love. I think even complete strangers, like, they're
Sure.
actually genuinely trying to be helpful, but it's, yeah. Instead of, like, engaging you in a conversation or saying something like, isn't that unsafe? Or has anyone told you that maybe that's not a good thing? They're like, that is terrible. It's the worst thing. You're going to kill your baby.
Yeah. I teach hot yoga. The doctor said, if you feel faint, stop. I don't feel faint.
Yeah.
Yesterday I sat in the toilet and I started seeing stars, but that's something else.
And it's also relative, like hot being like you teach in a heated room, but like keeps it at like 90, 95.
Yeah.
As opposed to like a hot tub or a true like what is it, vinyasa or whatever that's like.
No, Bikram.
Bikram, okay, Bikram yoga that's like 102 degrees.
104.
Yeah. That's not healthy, but you know.
But talk about the scary parts of pregnancy is like, because everyone has an opinion, it's hard not to, and I try very, very hard. It's hard not to take things to heart, to be like, well, this happened to this person. Because everyone's got a story, too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even there's a yoga instructor who took my class on Saturday, and she came up to me. She's like, oh, my God, I didn't know you were pregnant. I had to stop teaching hot yoga classes because I was feeling really sick. And while I was teaching, I ended up having a miscarriage. And so that got a little bit in my head of, like, my God, this hot, and is this going to cause a miscarriage or whatever? But it's not.
No.
It's not true. But she's like, and I know that isn't true. It just, to her in her head, she connected heat to miscarriage, whereas like for me, I know that I'm healthy enough to be able to teach there.
Yeah.
And once my body tells me don't, I won't.
Yeah, and you haven't had any kind of lightheaded stuff like you said.
No, not at all.
Yeah, and I mean, take this with a grain of salt, listeners, because if you're someone who's listening to this and has not had children, or you know you're listening to it years from now because things live forever on the internet, like we have just, there's this one book that's been very helpful for us. It's been a like daily, you know, here's some little things about pregnancy, and on this day here's what's probably happening to you, and some of it has been phenomenal and prescient to a level where we're like 2 minutes before opening the book, before we go to bed at night, we'll say something that we then read about in the book, and it's literally like exactly the same experience that this author is talking about on this exact day of their pregnancy compared to what we just said in this pregnancy.
I just farted
I was gonna let it happen and have the
so
viewers,
bad.
the ones who are like in the know because you just waved your hand, that only the people watching would know what had occurred. I wasn't gonna call it out. I was just gonna, you know, power through.
That's another thing about pregnancy. You don't know when farts are coming out or puke, apparently.
Anyway, so I was in the middle of talking about something, and
So
I can't
that
remember what it
book.
was now. Oh, the book. Thank
Yeah.
you. But then there's other times, because the book was published, and I think we looked it up 2006 or something like
Yeah.
that. So that's when I graduated high school. And lots have changed since then. Lots.
Yeah.
And so, you know, listen to your own doctor. Read what's the most up-to-date stuff. The book that I've enjoyed the most is Expecting Better, and it's because every person is different, and every pregnancy within that person is different, and therefore there's just so many variety of things that can occur to you, and so many variable ways that your body can interact with things, which is why this book presents probabilities. It's from an economist, and they talk about like the chances of things happening and what the studies are that are empirical, rather than simply, you know, old wives' tales or things that were based on like this one study with 7 people that became like quote unquote medical knowledge for 20 decades. Like,
Yeah. And Nick clearly isn't a stats guy and a data guy, obviously.
duh.
And I'm very lucky to have a partner who's learning all these things with me. And then I have to feel all the things.
Yeah.
And you have to learn through my experience because it's not something you will ever be able to feel.
Yeah, correct.
And it's been scary, I think. And I just, again, want to say, we are not experts. I'm only halfway there. I haven't even had a child yet, so I don't know. But, like, this is just our true experience of what has happened during pregnancy. And I think people need to talk more about it, about the things that are good and about the things that are horrible. And, like, earlier this summer, before we got pregnant for real, we got pregnant for real, I guess, and lost it. And so
Yeah.
it was really a tough experience. It wasn't something that we were planning at that point.
Yeah.
It happened. And then all of a sudden it was gone. And it was a really, really scary and sad and tough experience for the both of us.
Yeah.
But what's been really helpful also is being able to share with other women that has happened to them. One of my really good friends from high school just messaged me on Instagram yesterday because October is like pregnancy loss awareness month or something. And she said she had 2 miscarriages in between her 2 children. And then the woman that I was talking to at the yoga studio had 3. My hairdresser had 2. And it's like, people don't even talk about this. It's seen as like, you did something bad. And so after it happened to me, I said, what is wrong with me? What did I do? Did I go in too hot of a room? Did I drink a margarita too much or something? Which I didn't, but...
I think you had sushi like the weekend before or something.
Did the raw fish kill my child?
Yeah.
It's crazy, and that's the scariest part. And I'm still feeling scared because you don't know what's happening. Like, finally starting to feel the baby move, but then if I don't feel the baby move, I'm like, that's it. This is it.
Yeah.
And you're like that for 9 months.
And you live in that fear, and that is probably the scariest part. And I will admit, I think you are maybe a more highly anxious person compared to like the population. Like you're slightly higher on anxiety. Plus that experience. But for us, for our lived experience, personally, I think things were made worse by going through that first miscarriage. The exact experience, and we can get into that. But like the fact that you felt so alone and it felt like nobody else had done it. And so that's one of the reasons we wanted to talk about some of these things. We decided months before we were willing to share with everyone that you were pregnant, that whenever we were ready and comfortable to talk about this, one of the things we wanted to make sure we talked about was like our experience with this, because no one talks about it. No one shares this thing. And then it makes it that much more scary, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because you don't know that estimates are 1 in 5 or 1 in 4 pregnancies and miscarriage. Yeah. 1 in 5. That means like literally every one of us knows, if you're at our age at least, can think of 5 babies that we know.
Yeah, exactly. And doctors, when I went in, didn't know what was happening. I think it was too early, and I didn't know it was too early because I don't know how to calculate things, but like...
The counting is hard, as we've discussed.
They were also seemingly gaslighting me.
Yeah.
Because I went into the doctor, and I was bleeding, and they made me take a pregnancy test, and they said it showed negative.
Yep.
So then I had to start taking... I took 5.
We took 5 over the weekend beforehand, and then 2 days later, they're like, you people are stupid. What are you talking about?
Yeah, they're like, there's nothing in you, whatever. So then they did a blood test, and it shows up positive.
Yeah.
And then I had to get my blood drawn every 48 hours for 2 weeks, 3 weeks. I was like bruised all the way down just to see, because they didn't know what was happening. And then they said, oh, well, because we can't find it, it's possible ectopic, which was a word I had never heard before.
Correct.
Which means that
and they just threw it out there like it was nothing.
Yeah, which means it implants somewhere where it's not supposed to.
and can very easily and quickly become fatal to the mother.
Yes. If it ruptures inside of you, you could die. And so they're like, well, we don't know. Maybe. We could give you this drug that's also what they use for people who are in chemotherapy.
Right.
And then you can't get pregnant for 6 months.
Like,
otherwise, it's a
literally
danger
won't
to
let
you.
Yeah.
And like... all of that happened within a span of 2 months of like people telling me I am and then not pregnant and then there's something wrong with me and then
2 weeks.
Well, yeah, but it continued on because when you have a miscarriage,
it takes time.
I bled for a very long time, you know? It's just crazy. And like women go through this regularly and don't talk about it. And that's not true. That's like a blanket statement. Some people do, but a lot of times they don't bring it up because there's just shame around what did you do wrong?
Yeah.
And it took me a lot of therapy to realize that I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah.
It was more so just like, that one wasn't supposed to happen. Something was going on with it. But, yeah. So this whole experience has been horrifying, honestly. And, like, I haven't really let Nick, especially for the first couple months, get excited because I was too scared to get excited.
Yeah.
I was afraid once we got excited about something, it would be gone.
Yeah. Which has to do with some of your specific neuroses and things that you're working on in terms of like the fear of good things always lead to bad things. But
yeah, it's
but
hard.
that's still, but it like, and I don't mean to discount like your experience. Like it has been scary. Mm-hmm. Like there have been completely legitimate parts that are scary.
Yeah. And I still, like, last week I felt bubbles in my tummy, Googled it, and it was like, oh, your baby's upside down, everything's bad.
Yeah, I get a text message from Danielle that's like, our kid must be upside down, and it means this and it could mean that. And I was like, where are you getting this information? Did you Google things when we talked about you not Googling things? And I get a gift back. Maybe. I was like, call the doctor.
I did call the doctor. The nurse was very kind, but she also kind of laughed at me.
Well,
in like a good way. And she was like, you're fine.
Oh, sweet summer child kind of thing.
Yeah. But as a first-time mother, first-time person being pregnant, like, how in the hell am I supposed to know? Nothing is normal. Your body changes so much. I can feel my abs literally separating.
Which that's a frightening, that's frightening for me to just imagine occurring.
And for a person who's had severe body image issues and the past couple of years has worked really hard on, like, my abs, not that I had them, but, it's important to me as, a huge muscle in my body to feel that they're, like, bloop. It's just wild. But, I mean, I think we're looking forward to a lot of things, too. I'm convinced that the first time I felt my child kick or move was when I was listening to the new NSYNC song, and he knew. He already knew. And I think we're slowly starting to be okay with, I bought wallpaper for a nursery. We made a registry, which, damn, that shit's scary, too.
Expensive, and am I going to get the right one? And... yeah.
Yeah. So this whole thing has been really scary.
What's one thing you wish you'd done differently to alleviate some of that fright, that scariness?
That's a good question. I think just listening to my own body and not being like, well, this person felt this and this happened, so assuming that it's happening to me.
Okay.
But it's also hard when I don't know. Like, I can text one friend and be like, did you feel cramps? And they said, no, absolutely not. And the other person said, yeah, absolutely. Like, how am I supposed to know what's normal and what's not?
That's where statistics and probabilities come in. This is what I'm saying. You don't poll one person thinking that's the sum of all experiences. You go to studies that have, thousands of experiences and tell you, well, in X number of those, it's a 20% chance that it would be this thing that occurred.
I wish that, like, earlier on, I think, and this is easier said than done now that I'm not in it, I wish I wasn't so mentally miserable when I was physically miserable. I kind of let the physical sickness really bring me down.
Glad you recognize that now.
I do, and I was miserable. I'm not miserable anymore. I'm just scared. But I remember there was a certain point where I was like, the only thing I can do at this point, because it's not getting better, is laugh at it. And I think when I started laughing at the fact that I threw up on the rug or threw up in the car, like, wow, that sucks. But I can either choose to be like, this is what's happening, or choose to be like, I hate everything that's happening. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't making me feel any better. Mm-hmm. That wasn't allowing me to get off the couch. Mm-hmm. Like, I think I was in a mini depression of just, like, going from being such a active, fit person, I care a lot about movement, to not being able to move really killed me.
Yeah, and from what we've been reading and what we've talked about with the doctors, probabilistically speaking, it does sound like the first trimester is the most difficult. And it sounds, I would predict that some of that has to do with the psychology of there being so much change and you need time to adjust.
Yeah.
But also, it's like there's all these things that are, you don't have the sort of baby bump to be like, oh, look, there's definitely a thing growing in me and therefore I have reason to believe this. And instead it's just these internal feelings and it's everything feeling different and off. And your body is shifting gears to dedicate resources to a thing that it literally never had to dedicate resources to before. Like,
yeah. And, I mean, like, I already said this, but, like, the smell of coffee making me sick also made me sad. You know? Like, something I love so much I couldn't love. And then I was just eating, like, cheese and bread because that's all I could eat. And then sometimes I was throwing it up and sometimes I wasn't. And it's just, it was so hard. Now, I do know, I'm in my second trimester. Everyone says this is the best one. I do know I'm going to get really fat and miserable again because I'm going to have to pee every 3 minutes and not be able to move very well. So, it's all rough. Would I recommend pregnancy? No. Actually, ask me once I have a kid.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, at 20 weeks, at 20 weeks,
No.
I bet there's a lot fewer people that would recommend it than at... I was going to say like 60 weeks because I'm trying to be like,
60,
yeah. Or past, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, kid is born, had them for a few weeks. I'm thinking there's more that will say yes to it.
But I will say this just reconfirms how freaking strong women are.
Oh, yeah, I was thinking about that when you were talking about the puking story, because, like, go 2 or 3 generations ago, and that's part of the reason that was justified for us to be like, well, women should just stay at home. That presumes that women's only purpose is to give birth to children, which I don't agree with, but okay, fine. Are like maybe 1 generation or 2 generations ago, it was like, cool, we'll let you go to the workplace, but if you're going to do that, like, I mean, this pregnancy thing is not an excuse for you to. And so women would, like, puke in the bag like you did and then just go to work.
Yeah.
They would feel miserable all day constantly and still just have to, like, drive 30 minutes to go to their job and be in an office or be, like, on a factory floor and just suck it up.
Yeah. I mean, I'm lucky enough. I still worked that day.
Yeah.
And I, in fact, went somewhere in the afternoon and then caught COVID. So, and that was awful too. But yeah, we're very lucky to be like, I do have the option to work from home if that's something I need to do. I literally called you. I was like, I'm turning my ass around. I just can't do this. And every time I puke, I do cry.
Yeah, and I think,
hard.
I know you worked that particular day, but there has been days where you've seriously considered not, and maybe even, I can't remember if you've taken any days, sick days. I know you're trying to save them, but, like, I just think even that is more accepted now than it once was.
Yeah, my boss is very flexible and understanding.
Yeah.
So if I'm like, hey, I'm working, but I'm gonna answer emails to the best of my ability, she gets it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas there was a time when they were just been like, well, then you're not committed to this job, which is a whole other problem. But I'll stay off my soapbox.
Yeah. So, moral of the story: I'm terrified. There's a lot more things to be terrified about. It's been a rough experience, but I think we'll be able to handle it. If I could handle some of that shit, I think we can handle anything. So with that, Nick, anything else you want to add about my pregnancy being scary? I'm sure, I'm not trying to discount you. It's also scary for you, and you've had to, like, step up a lot, and you've had to do a lot more than...
Yeah, the scary thing for me, and I think for any partner, because you don't even have to be a man, but, like, any partner who's not the one carrying a child, all of this shit happens, and there isn't dick you can do about it. Like, there reached a point where I started, like, wearing, and still am kind of, my noise-canceling headphones around the house, like, just all the time if you were home, because you'd be gagging, or you'd be coughing, or you'd be, like, choking and making noises, and you were miserable, and every time I'd come to talk to you and be like, is there something I can do to help? You'd be like, no. And it was just this depression, like you said, this misery, this, like, there's nothing that, I'm so defeated, I'm hopeless. And there was nothing I seemed to be able to do to bring up your hope. And being around that hopelessness was bringing me down as someone who, you know, kind of is always struggling against that darkness inside of him. And so what I had to discover was, I think I literally have gotten to a point where I'm like, I can't remember how I said it the first time. I literally was like, cool, there's nothing I can do for you. Let me know if there is. Otherwise, I'm leaving the room. I need to not be next to you right now because it is bringing me down. And if we're both down, then that's just bad news bears. Whereas if I can maintain some of my levity by keeping myself away from you in that dark place for a little bit, it's better for both of us in the long run, because that's a very, very difficult thing for anyone but especially if you're someone who sort of is a fixer, someone who has this need to be able to provide, this need to be able to resolve things, to solve the problems. There's just problems you can't solve. You can't do anything about it.
It's true. Actually, you started the problem in the first place.
And that's the scariest part.
All right, Nick. I say we move on to talking about our movie. What do you think?
I think that's a good idea.
And what movie is that again?
We're talking about Scream.
Yeah. In love with movies. Da-da-da.
And we're back.
And we're back.
You missed it.
And we're
back. Terrible. All right, welcome back, movie lovers, or welcome if you skipped ahead to this section, because we recognize many of you may not care about pregnancy talk. If you're not that in stage of your life, totally fine. No judgment. But maybe you do enjoy the movie Scream from 1996.
1996.
1996. How old were you when this movie came out, Danielle?
4.
4 years old.
I was only 4.
You're a baby.
I was just a baby.
You weren't watching it then, were you?
I was not watching it at all.
I do remember it being out, though, and especially I remember the promotional stuff for it. But anyway, quick rundown of our opening credits for the movie Scream 1996, directed by Wes Craven. He's kind of, really frankly has reinvented and invented like the modern slasher multiple times over. Way back in the 1970s, he does the like original Hills Have Eyes, Last House on the Left, stuff like that. He also did all of the Elm Street movies, the Freddy movies, if you know Freddy Krueger. And, then this was sort of his Scream franchise was him starting new things as well. Let's see. Writer, someone named Kevin Williamson, known for a lot of the Scream movies. The Following, which is a TV show with Kevin Bacon, and then The Vampire Diaries, apparently. I will say this was produced by Miramax, so Scandal noted. For those of you who don't know, go ahead and Google Miramax and Harvey Weinstein and know why it's a scandal and why we're sad that that person got any money from the stuff that we're talking about. Anyway, starring, quote, end quote, and I put this into quotes, Drew Barrymore, because...
yeah.
Spoilers, by the way, for anyone who has not seen this movie. One of the things that was intentionally done that I do remember about this was them showing Drew Barrymore in all of the materials, and she was front and center on the posters when they first came out, and Neve Campbell, who ends up being the real last girl, the last survivor, however you want to call it, the trope, is like in the back, or like not centered at all in the trailers, like not shown at all. Drew Barrymore was a name, and the pretty blonde, who is usually the one who survives, so they sort of intentionally did a bait and switch, because the very first scene of this movie is a sequence that is Drew Barrymore getting brutally murdered, and then you meet the other characters that you're actually going to watch. As I mentioned, Neve Campbell's the main one. I know her from shows like House of Cards, more recently on Netflix, and the movie Wild Things with Denise Richards back in the day has a very steamy sex scene with her and Matthew Dillon and Denise Richards. Anyway,
she's very pretty, but I had never seen her face before.
Courtney Cox, everyone probably knows her from Friends, or if you watched Cougar Town, which is another funny one. David Arquette, you might know him from Never Been Kissed with Drew Barrymore, or I really, really loved him in Eight-Legged Freaks, which is one of my sort of terrible movies. Maybe we should watch that for Halloween, too. That's another, like, silly movie, but is kind of quote-unquote scary. Anyway, Rose McGowan from Charmed. Matthew Lillard, who you might know from Scooby-Doo. That's, Shaggy. Or Hackers.
Rat Race.
Rat Race. Is it? No, you always think he's in Rat Race. He's not in Rat Race. That's some other guy.
Dang it.
Sorry. And Jamie Kennedy, who is a comedian who, was kind of big in this movie and has not really had much of a film career, but some people who are older like me might remember him from Malibu's Most Wanted, which was a movie that he wrote, directed, and starred in. It's all his baby. And then, not credited, but in it, Henry Winkler as the principal.
Oh, yeah.
Who's got some cool, funny scenes. But anyway, so that's our opening credits. That is a rundown for this movie. That is everybody who's in it, anything you might need to know in terms of the high-level stuff. Before we get into our discussion of specific scenes, Danielle, we have one more thing we have to do. What is it we have to do?
Oh, am I dingling?
Time for Danny's Dingle.
The phone rings. Popcorn. The call is coming from inside the house. Yikes, lock the door. Brutal. Brutal murder. Honestly, intestines, brutal. Billy's the murderer. Wait, Dewey's the murderer. Wait, the other guy's the murderer. Wait, who is the murderer? I hate men.
That has nothing to do with this movie, though, right? Continue.
Principal. The principal just whipping around scissors. The murderer is in the building. Cops, party, murder for fun? It's a game? Garage door? Ugh. Lots of murder. The end.
You don't remember what happened in this movie, do you?
No.
Thought so.
I know, I'm looking through my notes. I'm like, what happened?
So, a couple of things I was thinking of.
Ghostface.
Ghostface is indeed the name of the killer. Ghostface Killer.
Yeah.
So yeah, I will remember that before this movie came out, those masks were probably like one of many that occasionally you would find on a Halloween. You could buy it at any sort of dollar store that would have Halloween stuff. And then once this movie came out, those being sold plus like with a sort of cloak or whatever it is you want to call that thing that they have on them exploded. It was like they were everywhere. You couldn't go anywhere without them being offered to you.
My entire elementary school, boys wanted to be Ghostface, and they had, I was telling you this, they had the ones where, like, underneath the hand, they had a little pump, and then it would, like, blood would flow through the face. And then after a while, they said, you guys can't wear this anymore.
Yeah, it's ironic because there's this whole, like, storyline in the movie of, like, because of these horrific things happening, teenage boys are, like, stupid and are, like, playing pranks on the, you know, on each other and on the girl and everything like that. And so they have to be like, first they're like, nobody can be here, and then, you know, no ghost face masks, and then we have to cancel school. And like the movie itself creates a situation where in schools are like no ghost face masks. I remember them having to like, outlaw them, so to speak.
Imagine today people walking around in those masks. Horrifying.
But so a couple of other things you mentioned. For one, I do think it's interesting. Like the most, I think, horrific deaths in this
Or the beginning.
are the very beginning.
I
like
agree.
they're the most gruesome, most graphic. And there's, you know, when the deaths all start to happen towards the end, there's certainly not graphic. But I mean, the garage door was it's probably the third worst.
Yeah.
The other thing I noted is your joke about Dewey's.
Billy, Dewey.
So I literally, listeners, as we were watching this movie, I started tracking who Danielle announced out loud, who she believed. So throughout the movie, there's a "he's the killer" count. So the boyfriend got a total of 3, where you said that guy's the killer.
Billy. Is that
Billy ends up being the killer, one of
the
killers.
Spoiler
Dewey,
alert.
you said was the killer 8 times.
Oh no.
8 times. Now, I assume, again, everybody has watched this movie, knows, like, the movie does that on purpose. It is trying to make you guess and giving you different reasons to think different characters are the killer. Like, Dewey, you know, is, like, in his bedroom when she gets a phone call from the killer, and then he conspicuously steps out only after the fact, and he's, like, holding a mask later. Anyway, but Dewey, 8 times. Dewey, who becomes the hero of this film. You were like, that mofo's the killer 8 times.
It got me.
You did say Matthew Lillard was the killer 4 times.
I wasn't wrong.
You at one point did get tricked by the movie that the dad was in fact the killer. You thought the dad was the killer.
because his car was in the woods.
And then you also thought Jamie Kennedy was the killer.
Who's Jamie Kennedy?
Jamie Kennedy was the one that we said was from Malibu Most Wanted and was,
he was like the dorky one?
Yes, the dorky dude who knew everything about movies and was like constantly telling them. So you thought Jamie Kennedy was the killer just as many times as you thought the boyfriend was the killer. I'm impressed though. You did blame Lillard multiple times, although I think like 3 of those 4 came in the last like 30 minutes of the film.
Yeah, I like that we watched this together, that I was able to say it out loud, and I like that you tracked it too, because it got me. But Nick, I think we forgot to do something.
What'd we do?
We forgot to tell our love stories with this movie.
Oh my goodness, we did forget to tell our love story. See,
Fifth season, we know what we're doing.
No, we get thrown off when we don't have a guest and we expect to have a guest.
Well, Nick, what's your love story?
I blame you, Family on Standby. I just want to make sure I say Family on Standby's name at least once in this half in case people do skip ahead. But I blame you, Family on Standby. Go find them. Go look them up. Tell them that you wish they were here with us because they would have been better. My love story with this movie is... like I said, I remember when it came out. I remember it being sort of a cultural phenomena. I could not respect or understand even how it was sort of breaking the genre at the time and why it became a cultural phenomena, but it spawned so many sequels that it kind of stayed popular well into an age when I was old enough to be watching these. And at some point, I'm pretty sure the first time I think I ever watched all of these might have been like on Sci-Fi Channel or something like that, so it probably also had some of the gory stuff taken out. But it was like a marathon, and I
watched all of them?
Yeah, it was like, and I was thinking about this too. I think I may have like either caught the end or missed all of the first one, and like kind of it came on board because back in the day, kids, you know, the TV schedule was the TV schedule, and what was playing at the time that you caught it was what was playing. You couldn't stream it at your choice. Anyway, so they had this thing called movie marathons where they would have movies like this, where you might have 4 of them, and they would play all of them.
How many are there?
At this point, we're up to like 6, but there was like 3 or 4 at the time.
Okay.
I know they did at least 3. I think they did 4 kind of within years of each other, back to back to back. And then they've kind of rebooted recently with Scream, but then Scream is actually Scream 5, and now it's Scream 6, and that's weird stuff. Anywho.
That's your love story?
What I was going to say is, yeah, I think I watched it probably for the first time late into the night, watching all of them back to back to back, and then like the stories unfolding, and it was very interesting to watch. And then I think that maybe one other time I went back and watched like the whole thing on DVD with somebody, but probably in college.
Were you scared watching it by yourself?
No. See, I used to watch scary stuff all the time. In fact, I think I've talked about this before. Ironically, Nick, who was one half of Family on Standby, who was supposed to be with us, the only time I can remember like legitimately feeling scared after I was, junior high or above from a movie that then stuck with me was The Ring. And I can remember he and I went and I don't know, he'd gotten a couple of girls and we went on a double date or something like that. And then like I was legit freaked out when I got back at home alone at like midnight and everyone was asleep and I kept thinking I was seeing things in the reflections. And I don't like spooky stuff, like paranormal things that feel like they could literally be lurking just inside that shadow that's on the other side of the room. Yeah. This slasher stuff doesn't bother me as much.
I hate it. So my love story.
Please go.
The first time I ever watched this movie was the other day, clearly because I was like, he's the killer. But I had watched Scary Movie or two, like Scary Movie the movie, not a scary movie.
Which was a parody film, kids, back in the day, built out of the fact that there were a lot of horror movies in the late 90s.
And I didn't really get the humor. I don't remember a lot from those movies, but we tried to rewatch Scary Movie after watching this, and I was like, this is
dated.
Very bad, very inappropriate kind of humor. But I hate scary movies. And I think if I had to psychologically examine myself, it's because I had a very rough childhood where a lot of like bad things happened to me. And so I didn't want to live in another world that scary things, bad things were happening because my life was pretty dark enough to begin with. So also, Nick doesn't really believe me, but I've had many people tell me that I can see ghosts or I can feel ghosts. I can feel the presence of things. And so, like, to me, it's too real. I don't have to see it on a screen to be like, I don't want to be reminded of, like, something that I can feel. So,
that's fair.
Yeah.
That's fair.
And I hate blood. So, like, I don't like the gory movies. For Nick's birthday 2 years ago, we watched, like, a scary movie marathon. Mm-hmm. And I hated it. We watched Hide and Seek. I don't recommend the movie. I actually despise that movie.
Did we watch Hide and Seek?
Yeah, it's one of the worst movies I've ever seen. I hate it.
Okay.
Don't you remember?
I don't remember that one specifically.
Ugh, I still think about it at night and I almost want to throw up. It's where they have to play a game of hide and seek and they're trying to murder the fiancé. Or the wife.
It's not called Hide and Seek.
What's it called?
It's called Ready or Not.
Oh.
That's why I was confused. Because Hide and Seek is a different horror movie.
Oh.
Ready or Not's the one about, like, they get married and then literally the night of their wedding.
She has to hide.
She has to hide because it's some weird demonic thing. That movie, I like horror comedies. And that movie I would classify as a horror comedy.
No, it's disgusting. They all burst into blood flames at the end.
And to a comical effect. Which actually leads us back to Scream.
Yeah.
Because one of my notes down here is I forgot how funny this movie is. When I said that they reinvented the genre, one of the ways that they reinvented the genre is a lot of these slasher movies, like your Freddy Kruegers, like your Jason Voorhees.
I've never seen Halloween or Nightmare on Elm Street.
Cool. Those creatures are like sort of, in fact, sometimes they use this word, like a force of nature. Like they're like the Terminator, essentially, incarnate, you know what I mean? Without it being a sci-fi premise. Instead, it's, spooky premise. The killers in this, the first Scream movie specifically, are intentionally bumbling idiot teenagers. And that's almost more scary because, like, it's intended to be like, yeah, it doesn't have to be this sort of force of nature. It can be scary because it's a real thing. And now thinking about, like, other horrible things, it can get even more frightening. But it is comical in the way that it is played within the movie Scream. Because, like, even in the very first scene, like, when they're chasing after her, and we said that's like really gruesome, but like they're running after her and she like smashes something in the guy's face. And normally, like, someone like Jason gets something smashed in his face and he basically stands there glaring at you and it's like he hasn't been phased at all. This one, she like slams the door in their face and then you like hear the character go, oh, you know what I mean? Or like they fall over furniture and things of that nature.
Yeah, they are very clumsy as the killer.
Yeah.
But I was going to say the beginning of this movie, to be fair, because I was scared when we started out because I don't like scary movies. The first, like, 10, 15 minutes actually are scary.
Yes. In fact, I said the scariest thing in the entire movie for me wasn't even like the sort of terrible slasher stuff like that. And granted, maybe it's because I'm now closer to being able to imagine this for myself because I've got a kid on the way. But the scene when the parents are sort of driving up and they come and they find their home like broken into, it's torn apart. You kind of see some blood. There's things that are broken and they're calling out to their daughter. And then the more horrific thing. So back before cell phones, everyone, you used to have a landline. And that landline would likely, you could get more than one, but typically you had the one landline that was the phone and you had to kind of like share it. And you might have multiple receivers in multiple rooms. But so she's got a hold of one of the landline phones out on sort of a wireless, what they call it, but it's still...
She is Drew Barrymore.
Thank you, Drew Barrymore. So she's begging, like dying, barely breathing, clearly like you're hearing her death. And then the dad is listening on the receiver. Even thinking about it now gives me chills because that petrifying feeling of like, again, that helplessness, going back to the pregnancy thing of like, you know they're there, you know they have to be close because the only way for somebody to be able to use that phone is that they're still in the house and you don't know where they are and you can't do anything and your child is dying. Yeah. That is truly terrifying. Truly terrifying.
I gasped out loud before that, when she was like, why do you want to know my name? And he said, I want to know who I'm looking at.
Yeah.
That was horrifying.
Mm.
And that starts the whole chase scene of, yeah. Yeah, the whole opening scene is very, 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 very scary. And it's serious until the guy is klutzy, the murderer is klutzy.
And it's still scary through that, but like
yeah.
it breaks it up with the laughter. Yeah.
I didn't laugh at all. And then the boyfriend gets murdered and like, it's just really gruesome. And so that set the tone, and I was like, oh no. Is the whole movie going to be this dark, this scary? But it's not.
It's really not.
Because then we open at a high school, and they're like, oh shoot, our what do you call them? Our peer, our friend just died. But still, they're high school students, and they're idiots. And this is why I put many times, boys are so dumb, because they're like joking about murdering. But looking back on it now, I should realize those three boys were joking about murder because they're murderers.
Yeah, they're the ones who are joking about it the most are the ones who are like the actual psychopaths that were committing these murders. But other things that kind of lean to this movie being funny is there's a lot of very intentional gags and sort of winks and nods to the audience. So for example, there's Fred the janitor.
Mm-hmm.
So Wes Craven created Freddy Krueger.
Yes.
Fred the janitor is there. I think Freddy was supposed to have been a janitor, was one of the stories that they had for it before he like died in a fire or something like that. And there's like some guy, Fred the janitor, who's mopping the floors in the school, and he's got the same like sweater basically that Freddy Krueger has. Or God, there's just so many like funny things. More funny, some guy after he gets stabbed is like, see? Like one of the guys gets stabbed. He's like, see, like I'm stabbed. Like this is real. I wasn't really him, even though he was him. Like
it was Billy.
Yeah, and there's just these comedic moments. Or like Henry Winkler's death is like comically over the top. Like he was really hamming it up on purpose to the point where it was clearly intentional. There's just a lot of things like that where this movie is like sort of lambasting its own genre. And in fact, it's like this meta commentary because you've got these characters, some of which end up being the killers, who are also talking about like, these are the tropes of scary movies, and then intentionally following them and like intentionally committing murders in the vein of a tropey murder movie.
I still think, like looking back at my notes now, because clearly I blocked it out of my head. I can't remember half the movie. It is still so dark though, because like the premise is this girl is next, Neve Campbell, whatever her name is.
Mm-hmm.
And her mom was just murdered a year ago.
Yeah.
And they don't know what happened. And they think that the guy killed her, but then they're like, that's not the killer. And that's the whole thing. Courtney Cox is trying to prove that wasn't the killer. And then they're going to kill her. Her friends murdered her mother for funsies.
Yeah.
And then are going to murder her for funsies.
And not just her friends.
Her boyfriend.
One of them's her boyfriend, which, and again, that means that they were dating before this crap went down. He, while dating her, committed murder on her mother and raped and murdered. Because they kind of glaze over that a little bit, but like that's the raped and murdered. And it's almost, and then continues to date her
and then gets mad at her for not wanting to have sex with him anymore.
Yep.
After her mother was raped and murdered.
Yeah, it's fucked. I mean, it is played for comedy in sort of the filmmaking way of it, but when you actually stop and think about the things that are happening,
I don't think it's funny.
I'm saying the filmmaking is played for comedy. There's ways that you shoot things. There's ways that you present things. There's ways that you deliver lines that are done for comedy. But when you stop and think about this as a reality, I agree. Like, the most fucked up possible thing is, just all of the terror, like, to be that level of psychopath, to commit those things in the first place, and then to do it, like, where you're intentionally doing it the way that you are, and to have been, like, faking your relationship with her that entire time, and just these layers upon layers of what it would take to be that messed up and to do that warped of things. Yeah, that's truly frightening.
Yeah. And
not funny. You're right. In real life.
She also just, like, doesn't want to give it up. Understandably, she's traumatized.
Right.
And then he finally convinces her. And his reason to have sex with her is because virgins are the only ones that live in horror movies.
Yeah.
And he wants to murder her.
Yeah.
So he wants to make her not a virgin anymore. It's disgusting.
Which I also feel like there is a intentional meta commentary here on Wes Craven's part, because there is that sort of misogynistic, pseudo-Christian belief of, like, sinfulness is what gets you killed in those movies, and that's why, the forces of nature come after you. And there's this very obvious misogyny from those characters and others. So, for example, I'd forgotten all of, like, the misogyny in this movie. There's a line early on where, and it turns out to be one of the killers is making this joke where they say something, though, like, only a guy could commit a murder like that or could kill someone like that. And they're like, because one of the girls is like, how do you know I'm not the murderer, or something like that as a joke. And a dude is like, no girl could do this. Misogynistic as all hell. There's constantly just very loud the word bitch being thrown at people, especially, the murderers towards the end. There's lots and lots and lots and lots of people who talk about her mother being a slut, and that essentially being the justification for why she was raped and murdered, which is horrific. Yeah, and it's just all these layers like that I think are there on purpose of sorts, because Wes Craven is then intentionally, like, flipping that on its head, where it's like, yeah, the girl who literally just had sex ends up being the one who then outsmarts and outlives them and becomes, quote unquote, the last girl.
Courtney Cox, also her character is creepy in this, though, and she is a little inappropriate as well. Like, she forces herself on Dewey, essentially, the cop.
I don't remember forcing. I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I apologize, listeners. I don't know if any of you are hearing the siren that's going past. We must have one going by our house. Forces herself. She definitely uses her sexuality, and I think that, again, it's done in a way that is played up on purpose. But you feel like she forces herself on him? I guess maybe I didn't
At the
think
beginning,
that.
she's really creepy. I don't know.
I mean, it felt to me like an over-the-top version of sort of the stereotypical using sex to get somewhere woman. Which, again, though, goes on its head of, like, she, theoretically, being the one who uses sex, like, is kind of the most, quote-unquote, slutty character that we do see. And she survives.
But she also wants people, I think I wrote, she wants people to die. Like, she's, like, into the... Is that what it says?
I'm not going to be able to reach your notes any more than I can read my own.
She wants people to... I think she's just, like, obsessed also with, like, this case and is, like, really creepy about it.
I guess you and I don't see creepy, and maybe it's because I've seen that trope more, maybe because I've watched more movies. I think it is a very intentional and specific trope of this sort of callous reporter, the one who doesn't care. Like, she definitely is, like, I wouldn't say rooting for people to die, but she doesn't really have any kind of remorse about the deaths because they lead to her having a better story. And that's all she cares about. Like, she clearly wrote some book about and got famous on, the story of Sydney's mother's death, and, like, is there to then just shove a camera right in Sydney's face, which that takes a cold, emotionless person, in my opinion, to, like, treat another human being that way.
Yeah. Overall, now that I'm reflecting back on the movie, because we don't have to go, I wrote a lot of notes because there's a lot of things that happen in this movie. Overall, it's dark and I don't like it. I think that it's just, like, it is really, when he says motives are incidental, like, when you think about the true ending of this movie, and honestly, I was on board. Post the Drew Barrymore scene, so from that point on until they reveal the murderer, I really liked this movie. I was like, this is because I was like, who is it? Who did it? Like, they did a very good job of, like,
You
making
like
it
a good
creepy.
whodunit. You
Yeah.
do like a good whodunit.
Yeah, trying to figure it out. But then, at the end, it's just the boys, and they just do it because they want to.
And, well, but even that is a very intentional choice.
Like, there is no motive.
Correct. Like, but that's, like, again, it's a meta commentary and a send up of, like, what I think Wes Craven is saying is, like, in the real world, for a real person to commit these acts, there's, like, nothing that really can justify it. For you to be, like, a serial killer murderer type person like this, motive is not a thing. Like, even some of the, like, you know, the Voorhees movies and things like that, and because there's also this line in here where they're like, who was the murderer in the first Friday the 13th movie? And she's like, I know this, it's Jason Voorhees. It was not Jason Voorhees, it was his mother who wanted revenge for the people who had harmed her son. And so that even like, by then, like, a lot of slasher movies had some kind of motive. Whereas these ones, I mean, it's again that, like, it's both having that meta commentary because they even point it out and they talk about it, and they're like, they say, you know, having a motive is so passé, or it's so yet last year or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's also, like, that's elevating the frightening aspects, because what's truly scary is the person who doesn't have motive.
Yeah. No.
Somebody who has motive, you can kind of, like, anticipate what their actions are going to be. You know why they're doing the things they are, which gives you an ability to be like, I can see this coming. There is nothing to predict where these kids were doing because they've given you no indication of how, like, disturbed they clearly were.
But then he actually does reveal a motive at the end, because her mom,
that's right,
was having sex with his dad.
I forgot about that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so he clearly got really angry and then got fixated on the murdering itself after I think he did it once. Then he was like, I'm going to do it again. Because him and his friend all three of them were obsessed with movies, and they were obsessed with, like, this sounds bad, but, like, to the point where I feel like you think that way about movies and think that way.
Yes.
And so that's scary too, to be like, okay, you can see things in, I'm not saying that you're a murderer.
Okay. I was like, hold up a second.
But it's true of, like, today's day and age of, like, you see something on TV and you want to, like, mimic it. That's why that's why people shoot up places, because, like, I saw a guy do that, so I'm going to do that. Things like that. Like, that actually is terrifying.
Yeah, I actually recently heard someone talking about mass shootings and described most mass shootings, or, like, one of the most recent ones, is actually what it is a public suicide. And they were talking about how up until the last second, that's still a cry for help. Like, they were given some specific case, and sorry to, again, step on a soapbox briefly, but given some specific case where some kid had, you know, literally had loaded guns, clips, and there were, like, multiple sort of warning signs that day, and it was through, like, the fifth one that someone finally did something and caught it. And like, that's up until the moment it happens, like, it's still a cry for help. It is somebody who's disturbed and is looking for assistance and doesn't know how to process their emotions or ask for that help, so instead they lash out.
Yeah, I mean, I could see in this movie, especially in the 90s, like, men were not allowed to feel feelings.
Yep.
So instead they found different outlets. Theirs was freaking weird because they were like, let's murder. And then at the end, they were trying to make it look like they were both stabbed.
Mm-hmm.
But they survived. But joke's on them. They were murdering each other at the end.
Yeah, and they didn't, and that's actually something that's it's like it, and this is where Wes Craven walks this tightrope of it being scary and genuinely fucked up while simultaneously being funny. Because, again, that's a perfect example. That final scene where stuff is breaking down, of it really being, like, played for comedy, but when you stop and think about what is actually happening, it is not funny at all.
Yeah.
But it's played for comedy. And that's the thing that I think was made this movie so groundbreaking, is it was sort of like being able to bend that. So that's some other jokes that I had about how funny it was. You know, at some point he says, like, behind you, you know, and it's like that moment of funny, you know, oh, surprise, because they're right there and it's played for funny. You know, at one point, you know, when they're talking about motive, Lillard's character goes, peer pressure. Like, he says peer pressure is his reason, which, especially at that time, I feel like peer pressure was this thing that was being blamed. It was this, like, I'd never heard the word peer pressure until that age, and then all of a sudden it was the thing that was blamed for everything bad kids were doing, peer pressure. So you had that, and then, let's say you hit me you hit me with a phone that you hit, hit me with phone dick.
What?
Oh, you hit me with a phone, dick. Like they threw a phone at him, and like he's saying, "You hit me with the phone, dick." Like that funny. Or Lillard is like bleeding out, and he's regretting his decisions, and he literally kind of bawls and says, "My mom and dad are gonna be so mad at me."
Yeah.
And like in reality, that is a terrified teenager basically crying out for mommy and daddy. But the way it is played in the movie is for a good laugh. And even just now, as I delivered that line again to you, you giggled a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I never thought I'd be so happy to be a virgin. Because that's Jamie Kennedy's character when he, like, survives it and he comes up. And again, we make that final joke about, like, you only survive it if you're a virgin. Now, granted, there's lots of other characters that aren't that did. But, like, that's, again, played for comedy. Yeah. Anywhere there was a possible joke, it was thrown in.
Yeah. Very dark comedy.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's...
But then at least the women live in the end. And Courtney Cox essentially comes and saves the day.
Yeah, and more than one. Like, because that's where a lot of the other tropes is, like, there's always, like, the one virgin woman who lives.
Mm-hmm.
And instead it's, like, most of your main women, neither of them virgins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
It's too bad we don't have the Stretch Berries on here to talk about this with us. I'm sure they have. I've been trying to represent some of what I thought they would say. Some of the fact that the movie is a change of pace. It was something new. I would be curious to see if they've seen the others and what the other sort of storylines are. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen more recent movies. I don't know whether I will ever watch Scream 5. I have had like previously no interest in it, but I was actually thinking about wanting to watch the whole thing because of this, and it was reminding me of that marathon that I had. And then I was looking things up for IMDb and finding the actor who played Billy, and I realized, because he's not in a ton of other roles, but he is in the most recent Scream. And so the storyline of the most recent Screams include the killer from the original movie coming back, even though he was very clearly dead, which is also something that happens in a lot of slasher movies, is like you have the killer very clearly dead, and yet 3 movies later, for some reason, they come back.
Yeah. The funny thing I think about, like, this is the awareness of the commentary on the genre. In this movie, they kept talking about Jamie Lee Curtis and how she was, like, showing her boobs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Or she was the only one that never showed her boobs, but she was in all the scary movies. Isn't Jamie Lee Curtis in the new Scream?
She might be?
I'm pretty sure she is.
I think you're thinking maybe of Halloween.
Am I?
Because she was in the original Halloween, which is why they're talking about her, because she was like the original last girl. She is, quote unquote, the Scream Queen, and she's on that TV show Scream Queens because she is someone who's known for that role early on.
Oh, Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox. Wait, 6? They just made 2 in 2 years?
Yeah. The most recent ones came out really, really quick succession. You got your girl Jenna Ortega, who's in a lot of things these days. She's the new Sydney. She's the new, like, sort of female entrepreneur.
Ooh, Mason Gooding.
Skeet Ehrlich, that's Billy.
His name is Skeet.
That's part of the reason I wasn't going to
Dermot
share his name.
Mulroney.
Anyway, so he's in the most recent ones.
Ooh.
People coming back. Okay, baby, this is not good. You're like just scrolling through pictures. There's no way we're going to keep doing that. What would you give this movie? Are you going to renew your vows, and how many stars? So,
how many hearts?
Listeners, if you're new to this, we have our heart rating 0 to 5 hearts, which is meant to be an objective measure of the quality of the film. And then the would you renew your vows is sort of like, would you personally care to ever watch this movie again?
I think I'd give it a 3 out of 5 hearts, which is like high for me because I get mad at movies. I can see why this is a good movie because even though I hated what was happening, I was enthralled the entire time. And I truly was like, I don't know who did it. Would I watch it again? No, I don't need to.
Yeah, so you're not renewing your
vows.
vows.
I'm not going to watch any of the other ones.
And that's fine. That's not no pressure.
Yeah.
I'll admit, knowing that the Billy comes back in the most recent, it makes me curious, just like of how they would even have made that work. That's the only reason I would be curious about those. What's my rating? I actually I think I'll stick to the lower of the two that I was considering, 4.5. So it's pretty high, listeners, but like to me, there's obviously some dated elements to this, but I think even the dated elements I genuinely believe were an intentional choice. I think that the filmmakers were trying to do commentaries on things like misogyny and highlighting the silliness of those things, which is really ironic given the production company that they were working for. But again, go Google that for yourself. Would I renew my vows? Yes. Am I rushing to go watch this every single Halloween as some people do? No. But I anticipate there will be a day perhaps in our future babies, cinematic education or some reason where somebody wants me to watch this movie again in the next 10 to 20 years. Where I'm like, okay, cool. Well, this is definitely sort of if you're learning horror movies, if you're learning slasher films especially, this has a very important place in sort of film creation history. And for that reason, I think I would probably watch this first one again at some point.
Sure. I will say overall, like, I was very scared going into it. It's not that scary. So, like, could I watch it again? Yes.
But you have no desire to, and that's fine.
I think I can respect the filmmaking.
There you go.
The end.
Fair enough. All right. So that is everything from us, movie lovers. Thanks for bearing with us when we have no guests and it's just the two of us. I know it's far less exciting when that's the case, but hopefully you enjoyed our conversation nonetheless.
And next month, we have, for the third year in a row,
keeping that tradition live,
our holiday gurus, Madison and Nick, coming back, and we're watching a brand new movie that drops November 17th.
I was about to ask you if you knew what we were going to watch, because I don't even know. What's
it's called Xmas.
It's literally just called Xmas.
EX.
I see what you did there. Okay,
yeah.
Okay.
So I'm very excited about that.
Well, that's exciting. I'm looking forward to it. Those are always great conversations, even if I don't enjoy the movies that much, but they're fun to talk about.
Just like I didn't enjoy the movie this much.
Exactly. And that's why we share things. So, movie lovers, if you want to hear more about us, if you want to keep the conversation going, you can find us at the letter N Love with Movies. That's N Love with Movies, all spelled out. We're on pretty much every social media app I think that exists. We are active to varying degrees because there's too many of them to keep up with anymore. But go follow us there, and whichever one wins out in the months to come, that'll become the one that you'll see us on. Then you can follow Danny where at?
At Danny Miami 4 on Instagram.
And you can follow me at Nick Loves Movies. That's NICLUV Love, Nick Loves Movies on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks very much, and we love... Oh, wait. I love you, Danny.
Oh, wait. I love you, Nick. And we love you, movie lovers. Bye-bye. That was my scream. In love with movies. Da-da-da. We did